She was rejected by her pack for weakness, but her first howl awakened an ancient alpha bloodline. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind seemed afraid to move among the twisted trees and thick mist that clung to the ground like a shroud. Lyra moved carefully, her paws barely making a sound on the damp earth. She was small, weaker than the other wolves of her pack, and everyone had made sure she knew it. Her coat, soft and pale, lacked the strength and shine of the others. Her eyes, though bright, were often filled with doubt. Every glance from the pack reminded her that she didn't belong, that she was not strong enough, not brave enough, not worthy of the sacred howl that marked a wolf's coming of age. She remembered the day clearly. The elders had gathered under the silver moon, their eyes sharp and judging. Each wolf took a turn, their voices rising in harmony, a beautiful chorus that resonated through the forest. But when it was Lyra's turn, her voice trembled, barely a whisper. The elders shook their heads, their faces etched with disappointment. The other wolves muttered under their breath, and some even snickered. That was the day she was cast out. "Go," the chief had said, his voice steady but heavy with disappointment. "Until you find the strength within yourself, you have no place here." Lyra's heart had broken that night. She had always dreamed of joining the howl, of proving herself, of being part of the pack in a meaningful way. But now she was alone, forced to wander the edges of the forest, where shadows moved strangely and the wind carried whispers that only the lost could hear. For days she wandered, sleeping under the thick branches of ancient trees, eating what she could find, avoiding the larger wolves that patrolled the forest. The isolation was crushing. Her body ached with hunger, her heart with loneliness, but she could not give up. Somewhere deep inside, a small spark of hope remained, fragile yet unyielding. One night, as the blood-red moon rose over the forest, Lyra felt a strange sensation deep in her chest. It was as if something was stirring, awakening, calling to her. The hairs on her neck stood on end, and a soft, almost trembling sound escaped her lips, a whimper that quickly grew into a howl. At first it was weak, unsure, like a child testing its voice for the first time. But then the sound grew stronger, richer, more confident. The forest seemed to respond. The mist swirled, curling around her like a living thing. The ground beneath her paws vibrated slightly, and for the first time Lyra felt power in her own body, a strength she had never known before. Her howl was no longer just her own. It carried with it a long-forgotten legacy, the blood of an ancient line of alphas that had lain dormant for generations. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the mist. Tall, imposing, and powerful, with eyes that glowed like amber fire in the darkness. Lyra froze, unsure if she should run or stay. Every instinct told her to flee, but something in those eyes held her in place. They were not cruel eyes, not unkind, but commanding and curious, filled with both judgment and recognition. You awakened me," the figure said, his voice deep and resonant, echoing through the forest like a low drumbeat. Lyra's heart pounded. Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I am Kale," he said, "last of an ancient alpha bloodline, and you have called me back." Lyra's mind raced. She had heard legends of the alphas, the strongest wolves, leaders of packs whose voices could bend nature itself. But those were stories, tales meant to inspire awe. She had never believed she could be part of something so vast, so powerful. Yet here he was, standing before her, and she realized with a mixture of fear and wonder that her howl had done something incredible, something that even she had not expected. Kale stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. Lyra could feel the energy radiating from him, a force that both frightened and fascinated her. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, the mist around them swirling as if in response to the power that had been awakened. "You are different," Kale said, his voice softer now, almost thoughtful. "You carry the blood of leaders, though it has lain hidden for generations. Weakness was never truly yours. You simply have not known your own strength." Lyra's throat tightened. I have always been small. Others, they always said I was weak, that I could never belong. Kale's eyes softened, and yet they still held the intensity of a predator. Belonging is not given, Lyra. It is earned. And sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places, from the ones who believe they are unworthy. You have done what no other could, you called me. You have awakened a legacy. Lyra shook, unsure whether to be afraid or proud. The feelings inside her clashed violently. Fear of the unknown, awe at the power she had awakened, and a strange, budding curiosity about this alpha who now regarded her not with disdain, but with something she could not name. Respect, recognition, something deeper perhaps. For hours they stood in silence, the red moon casting an otherworldly glow over the forest. The shadows of the trees seemed to stretch and bend, moving with a life of their own. Lyra realized she was no longer alone. She had feared solitude, but now the weight of the forest felt different, alive, responsive, almost protective. And Kale was at the center of it, both guiding and observing her, waiting for her next move. I do not understand this power, Lyra admitted finally, her voice trembling. I have never felt anything like it before. How am I supposed to control it? Kale smiled faintly, a mixture of amusement and patience in his expression. You will learn. Power is not something to be controlled like a leash. It is something to be understood, embraced, and guided. And that guidance will come from me. For now, your task is simple. Believe in yourself. Believe that the voice you feared was too weak is, in fact, the key to everything. Lyra wanted to argue, to deny it all, to retreat into the safety of her old self, but she could not. A strange fire had ignited inside her, a burning curiosity that pushed her forward. She would not let fear stop her this time. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the mist began to lift, revealing more of the forest around them. Lyra looked at Kale and realized that her journey had just begun. She was no longer just a rejected wolf. She was something more, something ancient and powerful, tied to a lineage she had never known. But with this awakening came a weight she did not yet understand. The forest was full of secrets, some of which were dangerous, and the echoes of her howl had not gone unnoticed. Other wolves, dark forces, and ancient spirits could feel the surge of power. Some would see her as a threat, others as a weapon to be used. And somewhere in the shadows, enemies waited, silent, patient, and cunning. Kale, sensing her thoughts, placed a paw gently on her shoulder. Your strength will be tested, Lyra, but fear not. You are not alone, and neither am I. Together, we will uncover the path that your blood has long been destined to walk. But remember this, the forest remembers everything. Every whisper, every shadow, every heartbeat. And those who seek to challenge you will not wait. Lyra nodded, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. She felt the pull of destiny, strong and insistent, calling her forward. She would need courage she had never known, resilience she had yet to discover, and faith in herself that she had always lacked. Yet for the first time she felt a spark of hope, fragile, yes, but alive. And then, without warning, Kale's eyes narrowed, his body tensing. Lyra followed his gaze and saw movement in the far distance, where the trees grew thick and shadows deepened. Something was watching them, silent but deliberate, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Lyra's heart raced. She wanted to run, to hide, but the fire inside her refused to be dimmed. The howl that had awakened Kale had also awakened something else, something older and more dangerous. And as she looked at him, standing tall and commanding, she realized that she would not face it alone. Are you ready? Kale asked, his voice low, a mix of challenge and encouragement. Lyra took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with determination. I am, she said, her voice firmer than she had ever imagined. I will not be afraid anymore. The forest seemed to lean in, holding its breath. And Lyra raised her head, feeling the ancient power thrumming within her once more. She let out a howl, long, powerful, and full of both sorrow and hope. It echoed through the trees, a sound that was hers and yet far older than herself. And in that moment, Lyra knew that her life had changed forever. She was no longer the rejected wolf, the weakling who had been cast aside. She was a force of nature, tied to a legacy of strength, courage, and ancient power. But the forest held its secrets close, and the path ahead was unknown, dark, and full of challenges she could not yet imagine. And somewhere in that vast, misty world, eyes watched, waiting for the moment to test her resolve. Lyra shivered not from fear, but from the thrill of what was to come. And in the shadows, Kale's presence reminded her. The journey had only just begun. The sun rose slowly, its pale light spilling through the mist and turning the forest into a world of silver and gold. Lyra woke to the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft sound of Kale's breathing. He was asleep, sitting upright with his back against the trunk of a massive oak tree, his eyes closed and his chest rising with each slow, steady breath. He looked almost human in his stillness, though the raw power in his form was undeniable. Lyra watched him quietly, unsure of what she was feeling. Fear had been replaced by curiosity, awe, and something she had never dared to name before. Lyra. Kale's voice broke the morning silence, deep and smooth, yet laced with an unspoken warning. She turned to him, startled. His amber eyes met hers, and for a moment the forest seemed to hold its breath. "You slept well," he said, though it sounded more like an observation than a question. I think so," Lyra murmured. "It's hard to sleep when the forest feels alive, like it's watching me." Kale's lips curved slightly. "It is watching. The forest has always watched those who awaken power it has long kept hidden, and now it watches you. You must learn to feel it, not fear it. The forest is not your enemy, Lyra, but neither is it entirely your friend. It is alive in ways most cannot imagine." Lyra shivered, part from the cool morning air and part from the weight of his words. She had wandered alone for so long that the idea of the forest being anything other than dangerous and indifferent was strange. And yet, under Kale's guidance, she felt a strange connection, as if she was beginning to belong, not to the pack that had rejected her, but to something far larger, far older. "You must train," Kale said suddenly, standing and stretching, his movements smooth, deliberate, and commanding. "The power you awakened last night is only the beginning. You are tied to an alpha bloodline that has lain dormant for centuries, and it does not awaken fully on its own. You must learn to summon it, control it, and understand it. Without that understanding, your power will remain wild and dangerous." Lyra nodded, a knot of nervousness forming in her stomach. I don't know if I can." Kale's gaze softened, though his voice remained firm. "You already have. You awakened me. That act alone proves you are stronger than you realize. But strength is not only in power. It is in courage, in determination, and in the choices we make when fear whispers that we are weak. You have made the first choice. The rest you will learn." For the next several hours, Kale guided her through the forest. At first the training was simple, moving silently through the underbrush, listening to the smallest sounds, feeling the energy of the forest through her paws. Lyra stumbled, fell, and often wanted to give up, but Kale's presence was steady, unwavering, and patient. He never mocked her, never scolded her harshly, yet he pushed her further than she thought possible. "You must feel the energy, not force it," Kale instructed as she paused to catch her breath. "Let it flow through you. Let it guide your steps, your senses, your howl." Lyra closed her eyes and breathed deeply. At first, she felt only fear and self-doubt. But slowly, a warmth began to spread through her chest, radiating to her paws, filling her with a quiet confidence. The forest hummed beneath her, and for the first time she understood she was not just a small, weak wolf. She was part of something larger, ancient, and powerful. Hours turned into days. Each morning, Lyra trained with Kale, learning to move with precision, to listen with clarity, and to summon the energy that lay dormant in her blood. And each evening they would sit together in silence, the fire of their bond growing quietly, steadily. Lyra found herself drawn to Kale in ways she could not explain. His presence was commanding, yet gentle. His power was terrifying, yet comforting. She felt both safe and exposed in his presence, and the tension between them was almost unbearable at times. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest turned a deep indigo, Lyra asked a question she had been holding back. "Kale, why me? Why did I awaken you? Why now?" Kale's gaze softened, and he looked at her with a mixture of admiration and sadness. "Because you were ready. Because your heart, though afraid, is pure and determined. Others may have tried and failed, but you have the courage to face yourself, to face the legacy that runs through your veins. And because the bloodline that connects us has waited for you, for someone willing to rise above fear and weakness." Lyra swallowed hard. "But I'm still weak. I still stumble. I still doubt myself every day." Kale stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Weakness is not the absence of strength, Lyra. It is the awareness of it. You have been given a gift, but it is your choices, your will, your heart that will make it whole. Do not underestimate yourself. You have already done more than you know." For a moment, Lyra felt a warmth bloom in her chest, a lightness she had never known. And then, as if the forest itself responded, a soft howl echoed in the distance. Lyra froze. Kale's ears twitched and he turned his head sharply. "Someone else is out there," he said, his tone cautious. "Another pack or something else entirely. They can feel the awakening just as we have." Lyra's heart pounded. She had hoped that her journey would begin quietly, but it seemed that danger and challenge were never far away. What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kale's gaze was steady, unyielding. "We observe first, then we act. You must learn to trust yourself, Lyra. The power you hold is not just for protection, it is for understanding. And soon, you will see how much responsibility comes with it." The next days passed in a blur of training and vigilance. Lyra learned to control her howl, to summon power from within without losing herself. She learned to read the subtle signals of the forest, the way shadows moved, the shift of wind, the quiet tremble of the earth. And as she grew stronger, so too did her bond with Kale. They spoke little of feelings, but there were moments, small, quiet, and unspoken, where their connection became undeniable. A touch of the paw during training, a glance shared across the fire at night, a silence that spoke louder than words ever could. One night as they rested near a stream, Kale finally broke the silence. "Lyra, you have changed," he said softly. "You are no longer the wolf I first met. You are awakening in ways even I did not expect." Lyra looked down, embarrassed. I'm still learning. I still don't know who I am yet." Kale's eyes held her gaze, unwavering. "Who you are is not yet fully revealed, but that is part of the journey. You must embrace every part of yourself, your doubts, your fears, your strength. Only then can you truly awaken the legacy within you." Lyra nodded, feeling a quiet determination settle in her chest. She had been rejected, cast out, told she was weak. But now, with Kale's guidance, she began to understand that those words were not the truth. They were the echoes of fear and ignorance, not the measure of her spirit. But even as hope and strength grew within her, a shadow lingered. Something watched from the forest's edge, silent but present. Lyra could feel it, a cold pressure in the air that made her fur stand on end. She did not know what it was, a rival pack, a spirit, something far older, far darker. But its presence reminded her that her journey would not be simple. Power often draws attention, and awakening an ancient bloodline is never without consequence. Kale sensed it too. "You feel it," he said, his voice low. "The forest is alive with more than just trees and wind, and our awakening has not gone unnoticed. Soon you will face challenges that will test not only your power but your heart." Lyra swallowed hard. I am ready," she said, though her voice wavered. "I will not run anymore. I will face whatever comes." Kale nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "Good." because the next step will demand everything you have: courage, wisdom, and heart, and perhaps even more than you know. As the night deepened, the mist rolled in again, thick and silver, curling around them like fingers of some ancient spirit. Lyra felt her heart race, a mixture of fear and excitement. She was no longer the wolf who had been rejected for weakness. She was awakening, not just in power but in purpose, and in the shadows of the forest, eyes glimmered, silent observers waiting, watching. Something was coming, something that would test Lyra and Kale like never before. Lyra looked at Kale, standing tall and commanding, a presence that both terrified and inspired her. She took a deep breath, feeling the energy within her pulse like a living thing. She let out a soft, controlled howl, not for the pack, not for the forest, but for herself. A promise that she would not falter, not again. And far away in the deepest shadows, a voice whispered on the wind, "So the child awakens." Lyra stiffened, her ears twitching and Kale's eyes narrowed. The game had begun and there was no turning back. The forest felt heavier that night, as if it were holding its breath. Lyra moved carefully among the trees, her paws brushing against the thick moss that covered the ground. The mist had returned, curling around the roots and trunks like silver ribbons, and the moonlight barely pierced the darkness. Kale walked beside her, silent and alert, his amber eyes scanning every shadow. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. Though she had grown stronger over the past days, the weight of responsibility pressed on her like never before. Every instinct whispered that danger was near. She could feel it in the forest, in the way the trees seemed to lean, in the soft rustle of leaves that didn't belong to the wind. Something was coming, something far older and more powerful than anything she had faced. "Lyra," Kale said softly, his voice barely louder than a whisper, "stay close to me. Do not let fear control you, but do not ignore it either. Fear is a signal, not a prison." She nodded, though her throat felt tight. I can feel it, Kale. Something is watching us." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Yes, and we must be ready. The forest has secrets, ancient secrets, and not all of them are kind. You have awakened power that has slept for centuries, and the echoes of that awakening have drawn attention, both good and bad." Lyra shivered. She thought of the way the shadows had moved the night she first awakened Kale. The forest had seemed alive then, and now it seemed even more so, almost sentient, almost aware. She had learned to control some of her newfound power, but the unknown remained frightening. They reached a clearing where the mist swirled in low, rolling waves. The air felt charged, as if the earth itself had been waiting for them. Kale stopped, his ears twitching and his body tense like a predator sensing its prey. "Here," he said, his voice low. "We are not alone." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Ahead, the shadows shifted unnaturally. A figure stepped forward from the darkness, tall and lean, with fur darker than the night and eyes that glowed faintly green. Lyra froze. She had seen many wolves in her life, but none like this. There was a presence about him, a silent confidence and quiet menace that made the hair on her neck rise. "Who are you?" Kale demanded, his voice steady, but there was an edge to it, a warning. The stranger tilted his head, his eyes fixed on Lyra. "I am called Riven," he said, his voice smooth but cold, "and I have been waiting for you, little wolf." Lyra's heart pounded. "Waiting for me?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Riven's lips curved into a faint, unsettling smile. "Yes, the awakening of your power has stirred things long dormant. You carry more than strength, you carry a legacy, and legacies attract attention." Kale growled softly, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through the ground. "Do not approach her," he said firmly. "She is under my protection." Riven's eyes flicked to Kale and he laughed quietly. "Protection? From what? The forest? From yourself? Power like hers cannot be contained by anyone, not even you." Lyra's chest tightened. She felt both fear and a strange curiosity. There was something about Riven that drew her in, even though her instincts screamed to stay away. His presence was magnetic, almost intoxicating, and she realized with a mix of excitement and dread that the challenges ahead were not only about strength, but about trust and choice. Kale stepped forward, positioning himself between Lyra and Riven. "Leave now," he said, his voice firm and commanding, "or face consequences you are not prepared for." Riven's smile did not falter. "I do not wish to fight yet, but know this, the forest is changing. Powers that were once hidden are waking. Choices will be made tonight that will echo for generations, and you, little wolf, are at the center of it all." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. The weight of his words pressed heavily on her. She was no longer just training or learning. She was part of something far larger, far more dangerous, and far more profound than she had imagined. Kale turned to her, his gaze steady and intense. "Do you understand what he means?" Lyra nodded slowly. I think so, but I don't know if I am ready." "You are more ready than you realize," Kale said softly. "But readiness is tested in ways we cannot predict. Trust yourself, Lyra, and trust the power within you. It will guide you when your mind falters." For the rest of the evening, they stayed in the clearing, alert and silent. Lyra practiced her control over her howl, feeling the energy ripple through her body like a river, powerful yet gentle. Kale watched closely, guiding her with subtle touches and quiet words. And though the tension in the air never fully left, Lyra began to feel a quiet confidence. She was no longer the weak, rejected wolf. She was awakening not only in power but in purpose. As the night deepened, Kale finally spoke again. "Lyra, there is something you must see." He led her to a small, hidden stream that ran beneath the roots of an ancient tree. The water was clear, reflecting the moonlight like silver glass. Kale motioned for her to look into it. Lyra's reflection stared back at her, but it was different. She saw strength in her eyes, a light that had not been there before. And then faintly she saw something else, a shadow behind her own reflection, tall and powerful, a presence that seemed to echo Kale's own energy. What is that?" she whispered. Kale's eyes were grave. "That is the legacy you carry. It is not only your own. It is tied to an ancient line, one that has waited for centuries to awaken again. You have done what no other has done, but with awakening comes responsibility and challenge." Lyra's heart raced. "Challenge?" Kale nodded. "Yes, powers like yours do not exist in isolation. Others will feel it. Some will seek to help, others will seek to control or destroy. You must be prepared for both. And you must be prepared for the choices you will have to make, choices that will test not only your power but your heart." Lyra swallowed hard, her chest tight. She had hoped that her journey with Kale would be only about training and understanding, but now she realized it was also about survival, trust, and courage. And perhaps even more frightening, it was about love. Her feelings for Kale had grown quietly, steadily. At first she had admired him for his power, his confidence, his guidance. But now she felt something deeper, a connection that went beyond mentor and student, beyond strength and training. It was subtle, sometimes unspoken, but undeniable. Every glance, every touch, every shared moment of silence carried weight, and the thought of losing him or failing him filled her with a fear she had never known. Kale seemed to sense her thoughts. He reached out and placed a paw gently on her shoulder. "Lyra, do not let your heart be ruled by fear. That is one of the greatest tests of all. Power, courage, and heart are intertwined. To awaken fully, you must trust both your instincts and your feelings." Lyra nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and uncertainty. She had never been guided with such care, such patience, such understanding. She realized that her connection with Kale was more than training. It was shaping her, teaching her, and showing her that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. Suddenly, a ripple of movement passed through the trees. Lyra froze. Kale tensed beside her and their eyes scanned the shadows. A low, almost imperceptible growl echoed from the distance. "Riven." Lyra's heart raced. She had sensed him before, but now he was closer. And there was no mistaking the intent in his presence. Kale stepped protectively in front of her. "Stay behind me," Kale said quietly. "Whatever happens, remember this. Your power is strong, but your heart is stronger. Trust it. Trust yourself." The figure stepped into the clearing, eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. Riven was taller than before, his presence more commanding, more dangerous. And yet, there was something in his gaze that spoke not only of challenge but of understanding. "You are awakening faster than I imagined," he said, his voice smooth and quiet. "But power without understanding can be dangerous, and I have come to see if you are ready for what lies ahead." Lyra's paws trembled, but she lifted her head, feeling the energy within her pulse like a living thing. She was no longer the weak wolf cast aside. She was awakening, learning, growing. And though fear and uncertainty still lingered, she felt a spark of courage, a light in the darkness that refused to be extinguished. Kale's eyes met hers. "This is your moment, Lyra. Show them who you are, not just with power but with heart." Lyra inhaled deeply, drawing strength from within. She let out a controlled howl, full of confidence, determination, and purpose. The sound echoed through the forest, resonating with energy, weaving through the mist, and reaching even the farthest shadows. Riven paused, a faint smile on his lips, and then he nodded. "Interesting," he said quietly. "You are ready, or at least beginning to be." Lyra felt a shiver of both relief and anticipation. The forest held its secrets close, and the path ahead was still uncertain, full of challenges and choices that would test every part of her, her power, her courage, and her heart. But for the first time, she did not feel afraid. She felt alive. And in the distance, the shadows stirred, promising trials yet to come. The first light of dawn barely touched the edges of the forest, and yet the air felt charged with energy, thick with expectation. Lyra stood at the crest of a small hill, the mist curling around her paws like silver smoke. Her fur, once soft and timid, now glowed faintly with the power she had been learning to control. Kale stood beside her, tall and unwavering, the image of strength and confidence, yet there was a softness in his eyes that few could ever see. Together, they faced the edge of the forest where shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, as if alive. "The time has come," Kale said quietly, his voice steady but low, carrying weight and authority. "The forest has waited for this moment, and so have we. But remember, Lyra, power alone is not enough. Courage and heart will guide you, even when fear whispers otherwise." Lyra nodded. She could feel her pulse quicken, her energy thrumming in rhythm with the forest. Every step she had taken, every moment of fear and doubt had led her here. She was no longer the rejected wolf, the one scorned for weakness. She was awakening, not just in strength but in purpose, and for the first time she felt truly ready to face whatever challenge awaited. From the shadows, movement emerged, a pack unlike any they had seen before. Wolves of immense size, their fur dark as midnight, eyes glowing like embers, surrounded them. At the front was Riven, his presence commanding and tense, yet not hostile. Behind him, the others watched silently, their attention fixed on Lyra. Kale stepped closer to Lyra, placing a protective paw lightly on her shoulder. "Remember, Lyra, control your power. Do not act out of anger or fear. Show them who you are, not just with strength but with heart." Lyra drew a deep breath, feeling the energy within her pulse like a river. She stepped forward, her gaze meeting Riven's. "I do not seek conflict," she said, her voice strong but calm. "But I will defend what is mine, and I will not let fear rule me." Riven tilted his head, studying her. "Interesting," he said softly. "You have grown since last we met. Your heart is strong, and yet there is more to learn. Strength comes not only from power but from understanding, and I will see if you truly understand." The tension in the air was thick. The surrounding wolves shifted, anticipation humming in their bodies. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first move. Lyra felt a flicker of fear, but it was no longer overwhelming. She remembered Kale's words, the lessons he had taught her, and the countless hours she had trained to control her voice, her energy, and her instincts. Then, a ripple ran through the forest. The ground beneath her paws vibrated slightly, and the mist swirled around her, responding to the power she had awakened. Lyra raised her head and let out a howl, not trembling this time, not unsure, but powerful, resonant, and full of authority. Her voice carried through the forest, touching every tree, every shadow, every leaf, as if the world itself had acknowledged her presence. The response was immediate. Riven and his pack paused, ears twitching, as the energy from Lyra's howl washed over them. Even Kale's chest rose and fell with surprise, a rare moment of admiration breaking his usual composure. Lyra felt a surge of pride and clarity. She was not just awakening. She was becoming the wolf she had always feared she could never be. "You are strong," Riven said, his voice quiet, almost respectful. "Stronger than I expected. But strength is not the only measure of an alpha. You must also choose wisely, for the path ahead is full of choices that will test both power and heart." Kale stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and Riven. "Enough words," he said firmly. "The forest itself will judge those who are worthy. Let us see if they are ready." From the shadows, the ground shifted again, and shapes began to move, ancient spirits, long dormant, rising to observe the unfolding moment. Lyra's eyes widened, but she did not step back. Instead, she felt a calm settle in her chest. The forest, the spirits, even the shadows seemed to recognize her. She was part of something greater, something eternal, and it demanded courage, clarity, and heart. Lyra glanced at Kale. I am ready," she said softly, yet with conviction. Kale's eyes softened. "Then show them who you truly are." The first spirit emerged, a wolf-shaped figure glowing faintly, with eyes that seemed to see straight into Lyra's soul. Lyra felt no fear. Instead, she focused, letting the energy of her bloodline flow through her, guiding her movements and her voice. She let out a second howl, this one even stronger than the first, resonating not just in the forest but within herself. The spirit paused, then bowed slightly, recognizing her strength and heart. One by one, other spirits emerged, each bowing or circling in silent acknowledgement. Riven watched, his expression unreadable, but even he could not hide a trace of respect. Lyra felt a swell of pride, not in herself alone, but in the bond she shared with Kale, the guidance he had given, and the courage she had found within. Then the forest shifted again. A low, rumbling growl echoed through the mist. From the darkness emerged a massive wolf, larger than any Lyra had ever seen. Its eyes burned like molten gold, and its presence radiated power and authority. The air itself seemed to tremble at its approach. Lyra's heart raced, but she did not step back. She remembered every lesson, every moment of doubt, every challenge that had brought her to this moment. She raised her head and let out a howl that blended power and clarity, strength and heart. The massive wolf paused, ears twitching. Its gaze met Lyra's, and for a long moment the forest was silent. Then slowly it bowed its head. The tension that had hung in the air for hours seemed to dissolve, replaced by a quiet acknowledgement. Kale stepped beside her, his presence steady and strong. "You have done well," he said quietly. "Your heart guided you and your strength proved your worth. But remember, this is only the beginning. Challenges will come, and choices must always be made with courage and wisdom." Lyra nodded, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. She looked at Kale, and for the first time she felt not fear or doubt but pride and trust. The bond between them had deepened, unspoken yet undeniable. They had faced the awakening together, and they would face whatever came next, side by side. Riven stepped forward again, his expression calm. "You have proven yourself," he said softly. "The awakening is complete, but remember this: power is not the end, it is the beginning. There will always be challenges, and the choices you make will echo for generations. Do not forget that strength and heart must always walk together." Lyra's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "I will remember," she said. I will not forget. And I will continue to grow for myself, for the forest, and for those I care for. Kale placed a paw gently on her shoulder. Good, that is all I could ask. The forest seemed to respond, the mist curling gently around them, the wind sighing softly through the trees. Lyra felt a calm settle over her, a sense of peace mixed with anticipation. The journey had been long, filled with fear, doubt, and struggle. But she had awakened not just her power, but her heart. She had proven herself worthy of the legacy that had lain dormant for centuries. And yet, as she stood there, basking in the quiet triumph, a faint howl echoed from the distant horizon. It was low, haunting, and unfamiliar, a reminder that the world beyond the forest was vast, full of challenges and mysteries yet to be faced. Lyra's ears pricked and she glanced at Kale. "What is that?" she asked, her voice a mixture of curiosity and determination. Kale's eyes narrowed, thoughtful. "Something older and stronger. It has been awakened by your voice. We do not yet know its purpose, but one thing is certain, our journey is far from over, and the choices you make will shape not only your destiny, but the destiny of the forest itself." Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the power within her pulse like a living river. She had faced doubt, rejection, and fear, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. She was no longer the weak wolf cast aside. She was an alpha in her own right, awakened in power, courage, and heart. Kale stepped beside her, and for the first time, Lyra felt completely at peace. Not because the journey was over, but because she was ready. Ready for the challenges, ready for the choices, ready for the future, whatever it might bring. Together, they turned to face the horizon, the rising sun casting long shadows across the forest. The path ahead was uncertain, full of trials and mysteries, but Lyra felt no fear. Only determination, courage, and the unbreakable bond she shared with Kale. And somewhere in the distance, the faint howl continued, echoing across the hills and valleys, a promise of adventures yet to come. Lyra raised her head, her fur glowing faintly with the energy that flowed through her veins. She let out one final, resonant howl, a declaration, a promise, and a signal to the world that she had awakened, that she was ready, and that she would face whatever came next with strength, heart, and courage. The forest answered with a gentle rustle of leaves, the mist curling in celebration, and the distant howl fading into silence for now. But Lyra knew the journey was far from over, and she would be ready.